Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did a little update on recruiting. Alabama just continues to be on an absolute tear. Teams like Miami and Texas are definitely picking up some steam right about now, but let's get into the most impactful freshmen for all of the conference contenders in the ACC this time around. We've covered all the other conferences. Now it's time for the conference that has a lot of questions going into this year outside of the football field, but let's get into all of these big time freshmen, and let's start with Landon Thomas. He is a tight end over at Florida State, and this guy's going to be huge for this team for so many different reasons. And I worry about this Florida State offense led by DJ just a little bit. I don't think he necessarily has the passing ability that Jordan Travis had. I don't necessarily think he's the most elite guy of throwing some of those passes that Mike Norvell really loves to have thrown. But at the end of the day, he loves his tight ends. There's no two ways about that. Velling over at Oregon State, who is now at Michigan State, was one of his favorite targets during his time there. And I think this is going to be the same thing for Landon Thomas. I think he's going to be absolutely huge for this team. And I think it's going to be someone that is going to be on the field quite a bit. I mean, they're going to have multiple tight end sets and something that Mike Norvell really likes to use, and it opens him up to be what makes him special, which is a pass catcher. So the Florida State offense has plenty of dudes at wide receiver with Hakeem Williams, Malik Benson, but the tight ends are going to be a real difference maker in this offense and really kind of open it up a little bit more. So definitely watching this guy very closely. That's no two ways about that. But then Bryant Wesco is probably the easiest choice on this list. He was the one that, outside of Jeremiah Smith, was making the most noise of the freshman wide receivers in the spring. He was someone that you heard about pretty much every second of the day if you were talking about Clemson football, because he's special. There's no two ways about that. The last couple of years, there has not been the recruiting efforts at the wide receiver position that Clemson has gotten used to a little bit, but this past year they really kind of got back on track. TJ Moore was another guy that they're bringing in that is going to be huge for this team, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bryant Wesco was trotting out with the starters to get off the first season against Georgia, and it would be really interesting to watch that, because I think this is a guy that not only is a really good receiver, but is someone that can totally open up this offense and maybe just be Cade Klubnik's favorite target. So it'll be really interesting to watch that. For Miami, I went a different direction than Anthony did. I went to Justin Scott. I think the D-line is one of those that I do think the front line is really solid at Miami, and I'm not necessarily super worried about those two guys doing a really good job in Barrow Jr. and CJ Clark, but I do think they need a ton of depth. I think they're going to need to rotate guys in and out and be that dominant force, because when you have those guys on the lines of scrimmage and you can kind of utilize that throughout your season, rotating those guys in and out can only really help you, can only open up the ability for you to just bear down on the offensive line and make it really tough for them to recover every single play. So I think Justin Scott, Armando Blunt are going to be absolutely huge players for this team, just kind of filling in the gaps where Simeon Barrow Jr. or CJ Clark just can't quite. So I don't know if he's going to be a starter to start the season, and frankly, I think he probably won't, but I think at the end of the season, he very well could. He's going to be someone that is going to be huge for this team, and when you look at his athleticism at defensive tackle, it is no secret that he is going to be outright scary throughout his time at Miami. But let's move on to North Carolina State here, and Terrell Anderson is someone that I think is going to be hugely important for this team. And if McCall goes down, the answer is CJ Bailey, and it's not even a question. But I'm going to go with Terrell Anderson right now, because they did a great job of picking up big-time targets in the portal. If you're talking about North Carolina State with Noah Rogers, with Justin Jolie, Kevin Concepcion was already there, so that's absolutely huge. But I think this is someone that is going to come on campus and maybe just kind of like we just talked about with Justin Scott on the defensive line, could kind of just fill in the gaps, be the person that if someone needs a breather, if someone needs a little bit of water during a drive, he can come in and make a couple of plays for them. So it's not necessarily that he's going to be a huge player for them or lead them in receiving by any means like that. I just do think he's going to be someone that's going to be very important for this team in terms of depth and in terms of keeping themselves as a potent offense, even when you lose some of those big-time receivers that you brought in through the portal and that tight end you brought in through the portal. So he's hugely important just to keep this offense as elite as it possibly can be going into this year. But let's move on to Louisville, and it's Trent Carter to me. I think I look at this defense, and I have a lot of questions, if I'm being totally honest, about this defense with a lot of different moving parts around it, but I think linebacker is the one that got hit the hardest, especially with Jalen Alderman finding his way over to Miami. You definitely have a void there that needs to be filled pretty much as quickly as possible, and it could be a freshman filling that role. And I think it's one of those positions, linebacker, that you will have those two guys that are your linchpins. You will have those two guys that will be out there pretty much every down, but rotation is huge, especially with a lot of these high, quick, fast-paced, no-huddle offenses that you're going to be facing. Keeping guys fresh is not an easy thing to do, especially at that linebacker position with so many responsibilities. So I think this is someone that maybe the snaps aren't, crazy plentiful, but at the end of the day, I do think he's going to be a big-time player for them and someone that absolutely could make a couple of plays that transform games, really. And then we'll move over to Virginia Tech, my favorite team in the ACC going into this year. But Andrew Hanchuk is a very, very good player. This is kind of like the Miami situation again. Anais Peoples is going to be an incredible player on that defensive line. Him coming over from Duke is absolutely huge. The depth is something that you're going to need to kind of build out throughout the year. And I think this is a guy that absolutely will be a part of that. I think Virginia Tech could flip just so many different things on their head, especially in the ACC, if that defensive side of the ball, particularly the defensive line, can come together the way they expect it to. Because if they can get that line of scrimmage depth, if they can get that push at that line of scrimmage, they're going to be really, really tough to beat, especially with a guy like Kyron Drones, pressing all the buttons, making all the decisions. So very excited about this team. I think this is a guy that might definitely won't start the season, but definitely can be someone that is rotational and only increases his snaps throughout the season. And then move on to SMU here. Kadavion Dotson is a very interesting guy because this is really just filling a need. He's not the most talented guy in this class. He's not the guy that I think they're looking at, super, super aggressively right now, but they need back-end help. There's no two ways about that, and sometimes you just need to find that diamond in the rough, that guy that comes in and you don't expect a ton from him in his freshman year, but is thrust into action and makes some plays, and that's kind of the way I'm going right here. I think this is someone that, although he's a young player, although he's someone that is going to need to learn the ropes, and maybe that does cause a couple of troubles for SMU's defense in the back end throughout this year, he still can make some plays, and he can still play some really good football and then possibly develop into a fantastic player in 2025. So I think this is someone that is kind of out of just need more than anything else, but one way or another will be huge for this team. And then North Carolina, this one was relatively easy for me. I think Jordan Shipp, the wide receiver, is going to be huge. North Carolina needs weapons just badly. Tez Walker walking out the door after the last year was a big, big blow, and they knew it was coming. There's no two ways about that. But they are going to need some guys to step up. And I think Jordan Shipp, obviously being the top wide receiver in the last class, is going to be the guy that's looked on to do that. He's someone that, frankly, I think throughout his career could be one of the best receivers we've seen at UNC in quite some time. I think he has just elite talent and someone that can totally be in all the record books for UNC, but he's going to have to come along pretty quickly because they have some holes there that need to be filled by just better athletes, just guys that are a little bit more scary when you line up in front of them. So I think this is one of those guys and definitely will be someone that can open up this offense just that little bit more. And then finally, Syracuse. This one's a little bit easy to me. Yassine Willis is a running back that is going to be huge for this team. I thought about King Joseph Edwards, who, by the way, all-name team in college football there. But regardless, I do think with LaQuint Allen being the only running back that is really going to be carrying a lot of the weight, you need that change of pace. You need that counter punch in your running back room, and the teams that have the most success on the ground have that guy. I think this could be that guy. He is a big back. He is someone that is going to bruise you quite a bit, and I think especially on a team when we watched what Kyle McCord was a year ago, there were some games where he was just not good. He was very, very flat and just did not perform the way that they needed him to. That's probably going to be the case at least one or two games this season, and they're going to have to really lean on that run game. That's where a guy like Willis is going to become a real option and someone that absolutely is going to have to come along pretty quickly because there's not a lot of other options at running back other than LaQuint Allen up there. So I think that's a guy that is definitely going to be that third down back, that goal line back, whatever you need him to be. he's just going to fill in the gaps where LaQuint Allen just needs a little bit of a breather. So that'll be a really, really fun thing to watch. And the ACC overall, I don't think will be defined by freshmen the same way the SEC or the Big Ten will be, but there's still some guys that absolutely will be making some noise. Anthony brings up a great point. Elijah Lofton is another one that's absolutely going to make noise for Miami. Justin Scott is someone that I'm kind of just leaning on, needing that depth and him kind of just playing out of his mind really early on. So that might just be a little bit more projection more than anything else. But Elijah Lofton's another fantastic choice among a number of just ridiculous freshmen all across the ACC. But let's take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a Top 10 Tuesday. We're going to break down first my preseason top 10, but also the biggest games I have for those preseason teams and the games that I think are just going to define their season the most. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.